After the wars of the Second Coalition, Napoleon would sign 3 separate treaties with Britain, Austria, and Russia, establishing peace in Europe for the first time in 10 years. But his actions in peace planted the seeds for war. His refusal to leave the Dutch Republic, his growing influence over Western Germany, the reoccupation of Switzerland, and the annexation of northern Italy proved to the Allies that paper and ink would not be enough to keep Napoleon's ambitions in check. And by 1805, all 3 nations came to the same conclusion, that only war could solve their differences. Napoleon, now emperor, would have to face insurmountable odds if he wanted to keep his crown and strengthen his hold over Europe. First Consul Napoleon Bonaparte's victory at the Battle of Marengo had established peace in Europe for the first time in 10 years. Napoleon's lightning campaign had brought all the nations of the Second Coalition to peace, except for Britain, but even she saw conclusion to the conflict and signed a shaky treaty with Napoleon, culminating in the Treaty of Amiens. French colonies were returned, the English would leave Malta, Portugal, Naples, and the States of the Church were evacuated by the French. However, war would continue 14 months later. The British were paranoid in the aftermath of the treaty due to Napoleon's appetite for territorial aggressions in Europe and abroad. On the continent, France remained in de facto control of Belgium and Holland. In Italy, Piedmont, Elba, and Parma were annexed, and in Switzerland, Napoleon used an uprising as a casus belli to invade and reoccupy the country. Napoleon's ambitions upset the natural balance in Europe, and specifically threatened British commercial markets. Napoleon, in response, argued that the British should not have any say-so on the continent. He found accusations of territorial aggression ironic, due to the fact that British troops still occupied Malta and Alexandria, which was a direct violation of the Treaty of Amiens. Tensions were rising. The only question was who would declare war first. The British, knowing that Napoleon was undergoing reforms to consolidate his power and that the French army was not ready for war, issued an ultimatum to France on May 10, 1803. And on May 16th, France declared war. The British government made the opening move by placing immediate embargoes on all French shipping and attacking the French in the Caribbean. In response, Napoleon ordered the arrest of all British nationals in French territories and client states. He then sent Mortier and later Bernadotte to occupy and sack Hanover, which was, in his mind, technically an English possession, due to the fact that the King of England was also the Elector of Hanover. This brought Prussia into the conversation, as now French troops were on her border. He also re-seized Naples, denying valuable ports to the British. Spain was forced into an alliance. Portugal was faced into paying a large sum of money for neutrality or face occupation. Holland's navy was absorbed and their population conscripted into the French Navy's Channel Fleet. Napoleon extorted vast sums of resources and coin from his allies to fund this upcoming war. For now, the war between the nations were indirect, but Napoleon knew that the only way to overcome Great Britain was to invade the island nation, and began to prepare this colossal undertaking. Being the narrowest part of the channel, Boulogne was selected as a launching point. All available military supplies were routed to the camps at Boulogne. The upgrades at Antwerp sent all of England into panic. In response, the English began to double the size of their coastal garrisons and began heavy recruitment into the army and the navy. Residing at the Château de Pont-de-Brie, Napoleon ordered the assembly of 200,000 men to assemble on the French coast. The majority of these men were the battle-hardened troops of the Revolutionary Wars. Bernadotte was sent to replace Mortier in Hanover, Marmont at Zeiss near Utrecht, Davout at Bruges, Soult and Lens at Saint-Omer, and Ney at Montreuil. A new corps was created under Augereau at Brest to keep the British distracted with the fake invasion of Ireland. This assembly of men would form the Army of England, but as it became increasingly obvious that Napoleon would have to use these forces against his enemies on the continent, the Army of England was renamed to what we know it as today, La Grande Armée. In 1805, the Grande Armée consisted of 7 corps. On May 19, 1804, Napoleon re-established the rank of marshal to give his new regime more legitimacy. 7 of these newly appointed marshals were placed in command of a corps. A French corps was a miniature-sized army that contained 2 to 4 infantry divisions, a brigade or division of light cavalry, almost 40 cannon, engineers, sappers, and artisans. Each corps would march independently of one another until the enemy was located. Then the corps would concentrate and destroy the enemy army. In addition, Napoleon also created an independent cavalry reserve, led by Prince Marshal Murat. This cavalry corps consisted of 2 divisions of cuirassiers, 4 divisions of mounted dragoons, 1 division of dismounted dragoons, and 1 division of light cavalry. Napoleon also created an artillery reserve, comprising of a quarter of the army's cannon and many engineers. He also transformed the Consular Guard into the Imperial Guard, a bodyguard under the personal control of the emperor, and consisted of the bravest and strongest men in the French nation. Napoleon drilled and trained his men, and as time went on, the army began to move in cohesion. Abandoned were the days of Napoleon having to manage multiple armies commanded by potential rivals for power. From this point on, there was only one French army, under one man's will. The invasion of Britain was a risky endeavor, but Napoleon's confidence was high. He figured that in 3 weeks, he could enter London and destroy the nearby shipping yards of Portsmouth and Plymouth. Then he would be able to dictate peace to the English from a position of strength. After his coronation on December 2, 1804, Napoleon assembled the men of each corps and presented them with their eagle standards. The emperor's words ignited the men's spirits. "Soldiers, here are your colors. These eagles will always be your rallying point. They will fly wherever your emperor deems necessary for the defense of the throne and his people. Do you swear to lay down your lives in their defense, and by your courage, to keep them ever on the road to victory?" "We swear," cried the men in unison.